Despite just being over 9 months old, the Nexus 5 still deserves the review treatment. What's more, the chance of this being the last of its kind makes the Nexus 5 even more special. The Nexus 5 software experience is mirrored by its design, simple yet understated. This makes the Nexus 5 feel like a portal to the software rather than a companion. Let me explain. The HTC One is a gorgeous device made of brushed aluminium, and it truly feels classy. This touch of elegance leaks over into scent. However, this amazing design distracts somewhat from the software. On the Nexus 5, however, the device is simply a way of getting to Android with no frills or tricks. Despite what I just said, I still think that the Nexus 5 is beautiful in its own way, especially in red. The wonderfully bold earpiece and the almost non-existent bezels show supreme attention to detail. Button layout is fantastic because it's logical, if you're right-handed that is. Your thumb rests on the power button and your index and middle fingers lay on the volume rocker. The buttons themselves aren't the most tactile, but they work and are certainly a good compromise between form and function. All in all, the design is quintessentially Android. The headphone jack is found on the top and the micro USB port on the bottom. It also includes two newish technologies that are still very much in the testing labs, NFC and Qi wireless charging. NFC is a standard on most Android devices these days, but I still found its functionality rather pointless. Qi on the other hand is really cool, but having to buy an accessory to use it makes it rather like NFC, which is to say, ineffective. Despite these technologies needing advancements, they both illustrate how the Nexus 5 is on par with higher-end smartphones. Talking on par with high-end smartphones, this device performs just as well as high-end smartphones. Despite having the slightly older Snapdragon 800, compared to devices with the 801, it still performs excellently. I am a firm believer that specs do not equate to performance, and the Nexus 5 proves this point. I haven't done any speed tests, but I can tell you this device runs fast while swiping through home screens or playing any intense game. The Nexus 5 rarely hiccups. This intense performance does have one disadvantage, however, which is temperature. Even when doing something seemingly simple like navigating with Google Maps, the Nexus 5 becomes a Nexus alive. Terrible pun aside, the Nexus performs well, and this is partly due to the amazing system running it all, Android 4.4 KitKat. On to what you can see physically. The screen is a wonderful 1920 by 1080 IPS LCD panel at 4.95 inches. This screen size is surprisingly comfortable, but if used with a case, which I recommend, and you'll see why in a second, it starts to become a wee bit unwieldy. Hand gymnastics may be required. The display is accurate, sharp and vivid, and of course, viewing angles are insane in a very good way. There are a few issues with the display. Firstly, its small brightness range certainly doesn't allow you to pull the brightness low enough for nighttime viewing, and most importantly, the screen shatters even with the lightest of drops, which is expensive to repair. For this reason, I'd recommend using a case with the Nexus 5, which I know makes it a bit more unwieldy, but it really is worth it. The speakers, or should I say speaker, is not awful, but there's only one, and it's completely muffled if you just place a piece of paper on it. The battery on this device clocks in at 2300 mAh, which will pull you through a day barely. If you want the conveniences of Google Now updates, your battery is going to have a hard time. I found that when in the city with mostly stable service, battery life was far better than in the countryside where you're lucky to get a single bar. Charging the battery was pretty quick, but certainly not on par with the Oppo Find 7 or Find 7a. On to the camera. The software is much better than it used to be, but even Google can't pretend that the 8MP f2.4 lens on the rear is up to scratch for today's standards. It does have OIS, which is impressive, but aside from that, most of the pictures just lack detail and clarity. Shooting in low light is a mess. Okay, it's not that bad. Video is not awful, but the microphone is. The major issue with shooting video is that you can't tap to focus, forcing you to rely on the camera to do the job. The front-facing camera is no better at 1.3MP and with 720p video recording, making your selfies even worse than usual. That software I was talking about makes taking pictures a breeze, but the image processing is poor like it's always been in Android. It's really clean and easy to navigate, and it has a plethora of different modes like lens blur, which actually works if you're patient, and photosphere, which is a neat trick. You've got to remember that this Nexus is super cheap for what you get, so of course cutbacks had to be made, and well, you guessed it, just like the Nexus 4 and Galaxy Nexus and Nexus S, essentially every Nexus, the camera was cut back. Using this device in London on the 4G network, data speeds were fast. Service and data are patchy as I earlier mentioned, but I believe this is more to do with the state of the wireless industry in the UK. When you're actually on 4G, which applies to only a few cities in the UK, speeds are pretty impressive. It's just getting that solid 4G connection that is the problem. Call quality was nice from the little amount I used there, and the speakerphone is definitely usable. Wi-Fi on this device is the expected 802.11ab/GNAC, which supports 5 GHz. It works well and definitely better than older devices like the iPad 3 or iPhone 5. Finally, there's one huge reason to buy a Nexus. Straight from Google Android updates, unless you're on a carrier. This means that you'll be able to get Android L the day it comes out, giving you the rights to laugh at your non-Nexus friends. Vanilla Android is Android at its purest, and in my opinion, at its finest. KitKat is fast and fluid. We are certainly past the days of Android lag. Dun dun dun! There are still a few odd spots in the OS. For example, there's a gallery app, which displays photos and videos, and then there's a photo app, which displays photos and videos. What? These inconsistencies may sound minute, but I can see elements of the OS being really confusing for a lot of customers. Is the Nexus 5 worth it? Certainly, even if it had a picture of Clint Howard infused on the back. At its insane price, it's hard to resist. The camera isn't one you want to carry everywhere, the battery life isn't reliable, and the speakers are nothing shy of unimpressive. But if you can live with these pretty minor complaints at such a price, it will do you wonders. And if you're a hardcore Android guy, what are you waiting for? The Nexus 5 has the best phone to price ratio, and it certainly deserves the praise it's got. Thank you for watching this review. You know what to do. Like or dislike depending on how you felt. If you want to see more, press subscribe and leave a comment in good manner. Have a wonderful day, and I promise you my next review will not be so far behind.